Welcome to the very first episode of Miss Wired, a podcast where experience meets expertise. I offer a unique dual perspective as a medical provider and a patient living with multiple sclerosis. I'm Selena Buongiorno, a PA working in neuroscience research, and I've created the Miss Wired podcast to educate, empower, and connect both patients and medical professionals navigating MS and other chronic or autoimmune conditions. This podcast is for anyone touched by multiple sclerosis, or really any chronic condition, whether you've been recently diagnosed, have been living with it for years, are a caretaker, or you're just curious to find out more information on how to live a healthier lifestyle. I want to discuss wellness tips for a healthier approach to living, as well as alternative therapies for pain, since that's one of my most challenging symptoms I deal with on a daily basis. I'm here to educate, share honest conversations, and build a community that supports and empowers each other. My goal is to help MS patients live their best, most informed life and help healthcare providers better understand and treat those patients. I hope to bridge the gap between science, support, and self-advocacy. When I was first diagnosed with MS, it was overwhelming. I really didn't know where to turn or what resources were reputable. It was a lot to take in. I was reading so many different sources and losing focus. I was also busy grieving the loss of my former self, while trying to navigate this new world that seemed to center around this heavy diagnosis. I figured, if I could create a podcast and help one person who is struggling, it would all be worth it. I chose the name Miss Wired because multiple sclerosis is a disease that results in a miscommunication between the brain and the spinal cord, a kind of miswiring in the nervous system. As for me, I may be miswired, but I'm still firing. Today I want to take you back to the beginning, before the diagnosis, through the symptoms, the fear, and the questions, and the surprising ways MS has changed my life. It's been a journey of challenges, growth, and unexpected strength, and by sharing it, I hope to help you feel a little more seen, a little more understood, and a little more hopeful. You're not alone. After all of this, I realized that the diagnosis wasn't the end, but in fact, it was just the beginning. Like a lot of people, it didn't start with a clear answer. There was just a variety of small things that didn't make sense. Maybe for you it was numbness, fatigue, double vision, pain. For me it was definitely the pain. I had this intense numbness and tingling in my hands and my right foot that would not go away. And after 6 months of ongoing symptoms, I knew I needed a workup. To make things even more interesting, I had lifted something heavy prior to the symptoms starting, so I assumed that the symptoms were just a result of the trauma. If I learned anything from this experience, it was never assume anything and always see your medical provider if you're concerned. It was 2020 and we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic. Things were crazy. I was working as a PA in primary care. I was trying to keep myself, my family, and my patients safe. I had lifted something heavy one day. That night I had pain in my lower back that radiated down my right foot. I treated it conservatively, but the symptoms did not go away. I tried injections, medications, physical therapy, chiropractic treatments, ice, and heat without relief. I assumed that I had herniated a disc in my lower back and it would heal with time. The numbness in my right foot remained for several months. The entire top of my right foot and shin was numb. So I decided to get an MRI of my lumbar spine, and it did show a herniated disc. So the picture fit. It seemed like it was just a herniated disc in my back. And then, as if I didn't learn my lesson the first time, I lifted something heavy again and hurt my neck. This time the numbness and tingling radiated into my hands. Again, I assumed it was all related to the injury and I had a herniated disc in my neck. But after 6 months of intense pain, I knew something was wrong. My hands felt raw. It was almost like I had sanded something for hours and I had no skin left on my fingertips. I noticed that I started having intense pain with easy everyday tasks. I had trouble shampooing my hair. I had trouble putting my daughter's hair in a ponytail. Every time I touched something, the textures in my fingers just felt extremely off. Then I started noticing every time I bent my head down, I felt this intense zinger that shot down my legs to my feet, which I would later realize was Lermite's sign. I had felt the symptoms were just a result of the trauma. I was in really good shape at the time. I had gained a lot of weight after having my daughter a few years prior, so I completely changed my life after that. I had been eating really clean, counting calories, was riding my Peloton every day, lifting weights. I had lost 70 pounds since the day I delivered her. I was in the best shape of my life, so when symptoms started, it didn't make sense. I didn't think I was sick. And then I had the trauma, so I just assumed it was all related. Some people felt I was maybe overdoing it with my workouts, but I knew something more was going on. I remember wondering, am I overthinking it? But deep down, I knew something was off. So I asked one of my colleagues to order an MRI of my neck, since I figured it was a herniated disc like I had done to my back. But what we found was so much more. I remember a radiologist sent me a message about a report, like he always did, and I glanced at it between patients and I saw the words, lesions on C2 and C4 recommend contrast for further evaluation. And I thought to myself, this is going to be a difficult conversation. Then I realized it was my MRI. I immediately began to think the worst. In case you didn't know, us healthcare providers make the worst patients. I was extremely blessed working in primary care at the time, because what happened next was just a whirlwind of a few weeks. I could not have done it without my office, specifically my friend Yvette. She honestly made magic happen. She had me immediately scheduled for an MRI of contrast with my neck and a brain MRI with and without contrast next day. Then my office got me into a neurosurgeon at the University of Miami. It was the middle of the COVID pandemic, so I had to go inside alone, in a mask. My husband had to wait in the car, which was not ideal, especially when you're thinking you're getting this big news about a potential diagnosis. I have to say, it was at that moment I did not like being on the other end of things. I really preferred treating patients, not being one. I waited for the neurosurgeon and I still hadn't gotten the results of the previous day's MRI I had. So he pulled it up on the screen and he turned the image so I could see. From across the room, I could see that my brain had several spots. It looked like a cheetah. He looked at me and he said, "Do you know what this is?" And I shook my head yes and started to cry. He said, "I'm really sorry, but you don't need me. You need a neurologist." I left the University of Miami crying. I was upset, ashamed, completely overwhelmed. What had I done to get this disease? What was going to happen to my family, my kids? I felt like my life was over. It was a few weeks before Christmas. I couldn't stop crying and researching multiple sclerosis. My office was able to get me into the neurologist who all of my MS patients see. Yvette kept calling to make sure I could get an appointment, but she never got through. Then I got a text confirming my appointment. I called to thank her and she was confused because she never got through to this office. To this day, we still don't know how I got that appointment, but bottom line, I got in with the MS specialist I wanted to see. He evaluated me, did a ton of labs, and ultimately confirmed the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. Getting the diagnosis is tough. That moment sticks with you. You sit there hearing those words, multiple sclerosis. Everything changes, and somehow nothing changes. You walk out of that office still yourself, but everything feels different. I had so many questions. As a PA, I knew the science. I knew the disease pathology. I remembered what we learned in school. But suddenly I wasn't the provider anymore. I was now the patient. And that honestly changes everything. For the next few weeks, I read as much as I could about MS. My husband threatened to take away my Google privileges. Sometimes the more you know, the worse it is. And what's really funny is I always tell my patients not to Google, and here I was doing it myself. My doctor ended up sending a nurse to my house, and I was put on a 3-day course of high-dose IV steroids. That was the moment I realized I do not do well with steroids. My resting heart rate during those 3 days was approximately 145 to 160 beats per minute. I could not sit still. I was running in place. I realized that I could hop on the Peloton and ride with all that energy, and that's just what I did. Those few weeks after my diagnosis, I found comfort in the Peloton. I rode and cried for weeks. At the time, one of my favorite instructors was pregnant, so I made her a baby onesie and sent it to her. I was so grateful for the support that I felt with the Peloton community. Then I wondered if there were other MS patients riding the Peloton, so I researched a Peloton for MS Facebook group, and there was one. So I became friends with some amazing people through that site, and one of them actually lived 30 minutes from me, and we got to meet, which was cool. Several months later, I got flowers from Robin, the Peloton instructor. I also found out that her mother had multiple sclerosis, which made the connection even more amazing. I started realizing that there were a lot of connections in the community. The hardest part wasn't just the symptoms and the diagnosis, it was the uncertainty, the wondering. Will I be able to live my life normal? Will I be able to keep working? Will my kids see me struggle? What's my future going to look like? I really couldn't handle the anxiety and the fear of the unknown. My entire life I had been a planner, and this disease apparently had plans of its own. At first I decided to keep my MS a secret. I was embarrassed, ashamed. I thought that maybe patients wouldn't think I could do my job. One of only my close friends and family knew. What I didn't expect, and what really shaped my journey, is how much strength I found within myself while facing this obstacle. They always say that you truly never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. I had no other choice. Throughout all of the tears and struggling, something just hit me, and I realized that I can either cry in the corner, or I can get involved and try to do my best to make a difference. Don't get me wrong, I still cried in the corner a lot, but I realized that I had to fight this. I had no choice. I had 2 small children to take care of. They depended on me. They were watching me. They had absolutely no idea what I was going through, so I had to do my best to stay positive, keep a smile on my face despite the internal struggle I was going on. My kids were only 2 and 5 at the time. I also realized I could possibly inspire others who are facing similar struggles and challenges. It was time to change my mindset to better myself and my family. In 2021, we signed up for Walk MS, which was virtual at the time because of COVID. Then a year later, in February of 2022, Walk MS was in person again, and I noticed that Rocco, the owner of Rocco's Tacos, who also has multiple sclerosis, had a huge team. And he was really making a difference. He was raising awareness for MS and raising funds to help find a cure. After seeing the impact he was making, I found the courage to share my story. In 10 days, we put together a team of 50 people and raised $4,000. The support I had was amazing. I couldn't believe it. It was at that moment that I learned how powerful one person's voice could be. I met Robin Nunley, the president of the National MS Society for Mid and South Florida, and I decided to get involved with the National MS Society. I joined the West Palm Beach Community Council. My walk team has continued to grow over the years, which I'm really proud of. I recently hosted Walk MS this year in West Palm Beach, Florida, which was amazing. I also started a Bike MS team last year. I trained with my husband. Well, I should say he trained me because he's the cyclist, and last year I completed my first Century ride. So he's been cycling for years, so he guided me, and this year we did it again. We rode 100 miles on day 1 and 50 miles on day 2. This past April, we completed the Bike MS 150, and we're thinking about training for another ride later this year. Bike MS was really important to me. The training was intense, and some days I really questioned what I had signed up for. But it was really important to me to finish the ride, both to inspire others and to remind myself that my strength may look different on some days, but I'm still moving forward. With multiple sclerosis, you never know how you'll feel when you wake up. Last year, I made another big change. After 9.5 years of working in primary care, I left my job to work in neuroscience research at Premier Research Institute at Palm Beach Neurology. We work on research for multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, and migraine. My work in MS research has been really meaningful. I've been able to see firsthand how the science connects to real lives, and I realized how powerful it can be to bring people together. Not just to understand MS, but to live with it fully. Because at the end of the day, I feel that MS has given me more than it has taken from me. I've made so many new friends and connected with a network of people to raise awareness and hopefully someday find our cure. MS does not define me, but it's part of my story now. And I've learned that sharing it makes it feel lighter. So that's what I want this podcast to be. A place where we can talk honestly about MS, not just the symptoms, but the science, the emotions, the community, and the hope. I also want to incorporate other chronic or autoimmune conditions because at the end of the day, being diagnosed with a lifelong disease is overwhelming and we can all use the support. Whether you're newly diagnosed, have been living with MS for years, or are supporting someone you love, I'm really glad you're here. I also started a support group at my office through the National MS Society, so I'm just hoping to help as many people as I can because after all, we're in this together, and this is just the beginning. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Miss Wired. If this resonated with you, please share it, subscribe, or leave a review because it helps others find us. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Miss Wired Podcast. Also, feel free to let me know any topics you're interested in learning more about for future episodes because I really want the feedback. In the next episode, I want to dive into what multiple sclerosis is and focus on how far we've come with the research and medications to treat this disease. Since prior to 1993, we really didn't have many treatment options, and now we have over 20 approved medications. Until then, stay curious, stay strong, and stay connected. And remember, even if you're miswired, you're still firing. Keep moving forward because your spark matters. Even the smallest spark can start a fire.